Welcome to Stories of the Wanderer, a calming sleep story series created to help you unwind and gently drift into rest. Tonight we enter the third chapter of Where the Roots Speak Slowly, the listening tree. In this chapter, the wanderer spends a tranquil midday high in the canopy, where a mysterious, ancient tree draws him inward, into a hidden hollow filled with soft echoes, gentle rhythms, and a quiet exchange of listening that lingers long after he returns. High in the cloud forest canopy, a gentle hush settled over the treetop village. It was one of those calm midday hours when the world above the ground seemed to pause and catch its breath. The air was cool and damp from the night's dew, carrying the ever-present fragrance of wet moss, green leaves, and distant orchids. Soft mist lingered in diaphanous veils between colossal trees, muffling what few sounds rose from far below, and giving every sight a dreamy edge. On a broad wooden platform wrapped around a venerable giant of a tree, the wanderer sat in quiet contemplation. He leaned against the ancient trunk, one palm resting on its ridged bark. In this tranquil moment already in progress, he simply absorbed the atmosphere around him. The tree under his hand felt warm and alive. In the filtered noon light, its rough bark revealed shades of umber and sage, furrowed with velvety moss and tiny ferns. A bead of moisture rolled down from a patch of lichen, tracing a shining path before dripping onto the wood with a barely audible pat. Each small sound, however gentle, carried meaning in the stillness. The forest was not silent so much as softly attentive. No wind stirred, and even the birds and insects seemed to take a brief pause. In the distance, even the playful monkeys were quiet now. Perhaps they too were curled up in their hidden bowers, dozing through this tranquil hour along with the rest of the forest. It was as if the entire canopy world were listening to something just beyond hearing. Even a lone blue butterfly flitted by in hushed slow motion, its broad wings scattering faint prisms of colour into the mist. The delicate creature moved without disturbing a single leaf, soon vanishing into the green as if it, too, respected the quiet. The wanderer closed his eyes, attuning himself to this subtle concert of calm. He could sense life all around, the trees breathing steadily, the distant trickle of water filtering through leaves, the occasional rustle of feathers as a bird settled deeper into its perch. Even his own heartbeat joined the hush, slow and steady. This midday interlude felt sacred, a reminder that between the livelier morning and the gentle stir of evening, the forest offered a time for rest and reflection. As he traced the knotted patterns of bark under his fingertips, the wanderer's thoughts drifted like the mist. He recalled a dawn when he'd been guided by a distant humming through fog, and a rainy afternoon when he discovered a hidden pool that mirrored the sky. Each experience in these heights was unique, yet all were connected by threads of tranquility and wonder. For each had felt like the forest speaking to him in its own way. The dawn hum had awakened a sense of gentle wonder. The rain-soaked afternoon had taught him about reflection and renewal, and this tranquil midday was revealing the music hidden within silence. High above the earth, life was both simple and profound. One only had to be still and attentive for the magic of the rainforest to reveal itself. His fingers began to tap the bark lightly in a gentle, musing rhythm as he daydreamed. To his surprise, the wood offered a quiet response. Through his palm, he felt a faint vibration in the trunk, like a subtle shiver running through the ancient tree. He straightened slightly and opened his eyes, alert but not alarmed. The platform was as calm as before. Nothing around him had visibly changed. Then he heard it, a soft sound coming from the tree itself. It was nearly masked by the quiet, a low, rhythmic tapping that seemed to pulse from within the trunk. Holding his breath, the wanderer listened intently. The sound was irregular but persistent, like a slow heartbeat or a muffled drum beat echoing inside the wood. This was the tree known in the village as the listening tree, famous for such gentle mysteries. Villagers often said that its giant hollow trunk held the forest's echoes. The wanderer had, on occasion, pressed an ear to its bark and caught faint reverberations of wind and water, almost as if the tree drew in all the subtle sounds around it. But he had never heard a tapping quite like this, steady, rhythmic, and alive. Curiosity bloomed within him, peacefully entwined with the midday calm. Was someone inside the trunk, perhaps making the sound? Unlikely. Few people ever ventured into the heart of this great tree, and only with purpose. Perhaps water droplets were falling onto a broad, taut leaf, deep in a cavernous hollow, creating a natural drumbeat. Or maybe the tree itself, settling under its great age, produced soft knocks as its vast wooden body adjusted and stretched. Whatever the cause, the effect was mesmerizing and oddly comforting. It felt as though the ancient tree was speaking in a secret code, a language just beyond ordinary perception. The wanderer took a slow, deep breath and recalled his earliest encounter with this tree. Years ago, as a curious child, he had heard older villagers speak in reverent tones about the listening tree, that if you pressed your ear to its trunk on a still day, you might catch echoes of old songs and stories woven into the wood. Back then, this idea had filled him with a mix of wonder and respectful awe. He remembered creeping up to the tree's base one warm afternoon, placing a small ear against the bark with equal parts excitement and wonder. At first, he heard only his own heartbeat and the blood rushing in his ears. But as he calmed and held his breath, he imagined he could detect something else, a faint humming vibration, as if the tree were gently snoozing along with the rest of the drowsy forest. The memory still made him smile. Now, years later, he was attuned enough to truly perceive what might once have been beyond his grasp. Rising in a fluid motion, he began to circle the trunk on the encircling platform, one hand trailing along the bark. The tapping beckoned him like a distant beacon. At one spot, where the sound grew a bit clearer, he paused and leaned his head against the tree. Pressing his ear to the bark, he listened deeply. In that posture, he felt a kinship with his younger self. Two versions of the same quiet soul, years apart, both seeking a conversation with this wise old tree. He could almost picture a child-sized him on the opposite side of the trunk, mirroring this pose, both listening for secrets. The thought was comforting. The tree had been a patient friend all along, waiting for him to return when he was ready to hear more. With gentle determination, the wanderer continued around the trunk. Half hidden behind draping vines and a cluster of broad ferns, he found what he hoped for, a narrow vertical fissure in the trunk, just wide enough to slip through. This crevice, carpeted in soft moss and framed by curling roots, was an entrance into the tree's heart. He brushed aside the vines with utmost care, releasing a few sparkling droplets onto his shoulders. Stepping sideways, he eased himself through the gap. The tree's bark pressed close as he squeezed through, surrounding him with the perfume of loamy wood and a faint, resinous sweetness. It was like passing through a green curtain from one world into another. Inside, the sudden change from daylight to dimness felt like entering a cathedral at dusk. The interior of the listening tree was a vast, hollow sanctuary. It took a moment for his eyes to adjust. When they did, he was greeted by a space both mysterious and inviting. The walls of the trunk curved around him, patterned with swirls of wood grain and adorned with patches of soft moss and feathery lichen. Some of the lichen emitted a gentle glow, pinpoints of pale green light that studded the darkness like stars. High above, slender beams of sunlight filtered through small cracks and knotholes, descending in delicate pillars that illuminated drifting motes of dust and a few tiny gnats. The mix of golden sunbeam and cool green luminescence painted the space in twilight hues, even as afternoon continued outside. The silence here was deep and layered. It took on a tactile quality, as though he could feel the quiet resting on his skin. Sounds from the outside world were reduced to a faint suggestion of the breeze and an occasional distant bird call. Within this chamber, the predominant sound was the gentle dripping of water. Here, those drips were magnified and enriched, transformed into soft, resonant notes by the acoustics of the hollow trunk. Each drop fell into a small pool at the base of the chamber, where water had collected from countless days of rain and mist. The plunk of each droplet into that pool echoed upward, overlapping with the next in an ever-changing rhythm that was both random and musical. When the wanderer took a careful step forward on the damp, spongy floor, his footstep was muffled, yet even that small sound seemed to awaken a response in the tree. The entire chamber hummed faintly for a moment, as if acknowledging his presence. He moved toward the center, where the pool reflected the faint lights overhead. Kneeling beside it, he trailed a fingertip in the cool water. The surface quivered at his touch, sending gentle waves across the reflections of glimmering lichen and shafts of light, mixing them into a shimmering mosaic. He settled onto a thick root that curved out of the ground and let his back rest against the inner wall. Enveloped by the tree, he felt held, as though in the protective embrace of an old friend. The wanderer inhaled deeply, drawing in the earthy scent of damp wood and ancient bark. Here, lifetimes of seasons were ingrained in the air, the memory of countless rains and sunny days, the traces of creatures that had sought shelter here, and perhaps even the echo of old lullabies once sung nearby. All of it lingered in this hushed haven. He let these impressions drift through his mind. The tree had stood for centuries. How many wanderers before him had sat in this very spot? The forest had known uncounted generations of people and animals, cycles of growth and quiet decay. Perhaps long before the village was built among these branches, others had found refuge and music here. He wondered if some faint essence of those souls remained as warmth in the wood, or as a distant harmony in the tree's ongoing song. He felt no loneliness in thinking of them, only connection. By listening now, so patiently and openly, he felt he was honoring all who had ever listened before. The soft tapping that lured him in continued as a steady heartbeat, blending with the whisper of his own pulse and the gentle drip of the pool. As he listened closely, he became aware of other subtle notes in the tapestry of sound. Far above, a breeze threading through a narrow crack in the trunk made a hushed whistle. Somewhere behind him, another droplet slid down and tapped onto a broad, dry leaf, adding a light tick to the pattern. The effect was a scattered, patient percussion gently filling the chamber. He sat in a state of easy focus, absorbing it all. The interplay of these sounds became a teacher, demonstrating how harmony could arise from simplicity. Here was a melody composed not by any one musician, but by the forest at large. The percussion of water, the wind's reedy whisper, the occasional soft note of a bird's call winding its way down the hollow. The wanderer reflected on how seldom people experience such pure stillness. In daily life, even in their tranquil village, small conversations and tasks added a quiet background hum. True silence, this profound quietude, was a rare gift. Yet it wasn't empty at all. It was full of subtle messages, a patient conversation beneath the usual sounds. He mused that just as he cherished the chance to listen, perhaps the forest cherished having someone to listen. Maybe the listening tree thrived on being heard, its gentle music growing richer in response to a mindful presence. A faint recollection surfaced. An elder speaking to the villagers on a calm night, long ago. She had said that trees respond to kindness and awareness. If you sing to a plant, it may grow greener. And if you sit with a tree in silence, the tree knows. He hadn't fully understood it then, but now that wisdom felt tangible. Here in the heart of this tree, he sensed a circle of giving and receiving. He listened to the tree, and the tree listened to him. Moved by this realization, he decided to offer something of himself in return. Then, as if in reply to his own stillness, a larger droplet fell from high above, striking the pool with a resonant plop. It reverberated through the trunk in time with the beating of his heart, the two sounds briefly aligning. The wanderer found himself smiling at the gentle synchronicity and felt an urge to respond in kind. He drew in a slow breath and began to hum a familiar lullaby tune, keeping it soft and low so as not to startle the quiet. The single note left his lips and expanded in the chamber, turning from a lone hum into a warm chord. The hollow trunk embraced the melody, sending it back to him layered with delicate harmonies, as though distant voices were humming along, or the tree itself had joined in. The wanderer's chest subtly vibrated with each sustained note. He could feel the music not just in his ears, but in his very bones. He continued for a time, letting the melody wander where it wished, until it naturally came to a gentle close. The final note hung in the air like a tender echo, then slowly dissolved into the overarching silence. In that deep stillness, the wanderer noticed a warmth on his cheeks. With gentle surprise, he realized tears had gathered in his eyes and spilled over, drawn out by the simple beauty of the experience. They were tears of gratitude and quiet joy. He did not wipe them away. Instead, he let them roll down, warm against his cool skin, as if the tree itself were offering a blessing. He remained there for a few breaths more, heart full and mind utterly calm. Finally, he gave the inner wall a fond, appreciative pat and murmured a soft word of thanks. He felt that his presence and his music had been kindly received. With a peaceful understanding that the exchange of melodies had been fulfilled, the wanderer sensed it was now time to leave, carrying the tree's gentle lessons with him. Just as he turned toward the entryway, something on the wall caught his eye, a faint engraving on the inner bark at chest height. He stepped closer and gently traced it with his fingertips. It was a simple carving of a spiral, nearly grown over by lichen. Who had made this, he wondered? Perhaps a child from an earlier generation, or a traveller who had taken refuge here long ago. The spiral's shape felt familiar and comforting. Its curve reminded him of unfurling fern fronds, of ripples in water, of the way sound travels in waves. Finding it gave him a sense of kinship with the unknown soul who had been moved to mark this place and honour their experience. In a spontaneous echo of that act, the wanderer pressed his palm flat over the worn carving for a moment, letting his warmth mingle with the lingering memory. He carefully made his way back to the narrow opening. He emerged slowly, blinking in the renewed light. For a moment, he lingered at the threshold, 1 foot inside the tree and 1 foot out on the platform, as his senses adjusted. He closed his eyes briefly and turned his face toward the glow, allowing it to warm his eyelids as he reoriented from the chamber's dimness to the canopy's open expanse. The world outside greeted him with an immediate richness. The soft gold of late afternoon light, the moist kiss of the air on his face, and the tapestry of forest sounds, now slightly livelier than before. After the hushed cocoon of the inner tree, even these gentle noises felt pronounced. The rustling of leaves was like quiet applause, and the distant bird song like welcoming music. Outside, the forest had been subtly transformed by the passing of time. What had been a silvery, diffuse light when he entered was now touched with warm, honeyed hues. The sun hung lower in the sky, its rays reaching through breaks in the canopy. The mist was lifting in gauzy ribbons, revealing more of the surroundings, twisting branches, flashes of bright bromeliad blooms high above. And, in the far distance, other treetop platforms glowing softly as they caught the sun. The late afternoon air was filled with the scent of warmth on damp greenery, an earthy sweetness rising from sunlit patches of forest. As the wanderer stepped fully out of the tree's embrace, a slight breeze greeted him, stirring the vines around the opening and ruffling his hair. With the breeze came a small gift, a single downy feather, dislodged from some bird hidden in the canopy. It drifted lazily down in a spiral, illuminated by a stray ray of sun, so that it appeared almost luminescent. The wanderer watched its descent, and with a gentle motion raised his hand. The feather landed lightly in his palm. Soft and pearly grey, it might have belonged to a quiet forest dove, or another gentle winged resident of the treetops. He marvelled at how something so simple could feel so significant. Tucking the little feather into a fold of his shawl, he accepted it as a keepsake of this day, an emblem of the forest conversation and the tree's unspoken gift. He looked up at the broad trunk and high branches of the listening tree, which now appeared as peacefully ordinary as any other giant of the grove, its great secret well kept within. Anyone passing might simply admire its grandeur, unaware of the hidden world of echoes and quiet music in its heart. The wanderer felt fortunate to have been its guest, knowing he would never look at this tree, or any tree, quite the same way again. Leaving that quiet corner of the forest, the wanderer returned to the main wood-plank path that led through the village. As he walked, he remained fully present, but with a new depth to his tranquility. The experience inside the tree had subtly altered the way he perceived the world. The filtered light seemed more luminous, the sounds of the village ahead more musical, the green scents of the rainforest richer, It was as if his senses had been gently retuned by the tree's secret harmonies. The rope bridge connecting back to the village swayed gently as if in greeting. Stepping onto it, he found himself humming that same lullaby tune again under his breath. With each soft footfall, the planks creaked in easy time, like a friend keeping rhythm. By now, that melody had woven itself into the fabric of his day, present in the morning breeze, in the hush of noon, and now mingling with the creak of rope and wood on his journey home. When he reached the central platform, the life of the village greeted him quietly. The restful spell of midday had lifted, and a few people were tending to their gentle afternoon tasks. The wanderer noticed an elder crouched over a woven mat, laying out freshly gathered medicinal leaves to dry in the last of the daylight. A pair of children sat nearby, playing a slow clapping game. Their soft giggles were carefully hushed, as if they too felt the need to preserve the peace of the hour. On a high stool by the railing, a young man was tuning a stringed instrument, plucking each string with a delicate touch, listening for harmony. Each soft note floated into the golden air, and the man smiled when the tone was just right. Strolling through this scene, the wanderer felt as though he were gliding. He paused to help the elder by handing over a few sprigs that had fallen out of reach, receiving a warm nod of thanks. Near the communal fire pit, he exchanged quiet greetings with a friend who was stirring a pot of spiced root vegetable stew, its savory aroma weaving with the fragrance of evening flowers. These simple interactions, filled with kindness and calm, were as nourishing as the solitude had been, a reminder that the peace found inside the listening tree also lived in the hearts of those around him. The sky continued its slow transformation toward dusk. Back at his dwelling, a cozy nook nestled against the trunk of a sturdy old tree, the wanderer noticed the tiny cluster of jade orchids on his windowsill. They were now catching the last light of day, their petals glowing a gentle white violet in the low sun. The sight inspired him to prolong the day's tranquility a little more. He lit a small flame under a tiny clay kettle of water and, while it began to warm, reached for his journal and a bit of charcoal. By the fading light, he sketched a simple memory from the day, an outline of an ear pressed to a tree trunk, with gentle rippling lines to represent the vibrations of the tree's quiet music. In the corner, he added the small shape of a feather drifting downward, a reminder of the gift that had fallen into his hand. The drawing was unrefined, but it captured the essence of his experience. Satisfied, he set the journal aside to dry just as the water reached the perfect temperature for tea. With his cup of warm orchid and chamomile tea steeped and ready, the wanderer stepped out onto his little porch. He sat cross-legged, cradling the cup in his palms, and savoured the gentle warmth that radiated through the clay. Breathing in the delicate floral steam, he gazed out at the village and the endless forest beyond. The canopy was now a silhouette against the dimming sky, and the mist that had persisted all day was transforming, sinking into the valleys below and wafting up to dance among the highest branches as a silvery haze. One by one, stars punctuated the deepening blue. As twilight settled, the soft happenings of evening reached his ears. Somewhere not far off, he heard a familiar melody being hummed, perhaps that same lilting lullaby he had sung inside the listening tree, now on someone else's lips as they rocked a child to sleep. A tender sense of continuity touched him. These gentle threads of music wove through the community, binding everyone in a shared calm. He hummed along for a few measures, purely by instinct, then let his voice fade, allowing the other song to carry on alone. For a brief moment, the two hummed lullabies overlapped across the hushed air, creating a comforting harmony before slowly dissolving into silence. With his half-finished tea by his side, the wanderer reclined slightly, resting his back against the smooth frame of his doorway. Fireflies sparked at the edges of his vision, and above the moon had climbed, its pale light falling in soft patterns through the lattice of leaves. He felt the gentle sway of the tree in the night breeze, the rhythmic, cradling motion reminding him of being rocked as a child. That familiar sway, combined with the day's rich tranquility, made his eyelids grow heavy. Before yielding to sleep, his mind offered one last reflection. What a gift it was to truly listen. In the quiet flow of life here, it was easy to forget to pay attention to the softest sounds and subtlest signals. Today, the forest had shown him again the reward of patience and open ears. Whether it was the tapping heartbeat of raindrops inside a hollow trunk, the echo of an old melody floating through mist, or the contented sigh of the village settling at dusk. Such moments of gentle discovery could not be forced or hurried. They arrived in their own time, like the butterfly that appears only when one sits still, or the feather that drifts into one's hand when least expected. As sleep gently took hold, he imagined himself still wandering among the trees, guided by the faint heartbeat tapping and lullaby echoes, strolling through a midnight forest woven of starlight and mist. In the near distance, he could discern the silhouette of the listening tree rising against the night sky. It stood silent and strong among its brethren, a gentle guardian full of secrets, watching over the sleeping village. The wanderer felt comforted knowing it was there, as steadfast under the stars as it was under the sun. He slept, enveloped by the forest's enduring lullaby, open to whatever peaceful mysteries the next sunrise might quietly reveal.